Hello! In today's video I am carving a pair of cherries. And I like this project a lot, in part because it's the first time I've used a cut-off portion of a previous project. In this case, the bit of wood I'm using is the part that I sawed off from the banana project. So I was really happy to feel like I'm reusing and doing my best to use all of the wood I have, which is kind of hard. I have other cut-off sections that I haven't really figured out what to do with. So to have a thematically appropriate project that fits with the wood I had felt really good. And the project itself went pretty well, I'd say. The plan was to have two cherries as separate as possible from one another, with the only connecting point, ideally, being the tip of the stem. But I ended up not going nearly that far. But I went as far as I was comfortable without risking breaking the stem, which I didn't go as thin as I planned either. It's important when carving to try to dose how close to your vision you're trying to go. Even in painting, and basically every type of art, you want to go as far as you can without destroying the general project. So to begin with this project, I started carving the bit under the cherries. I first made a rough cut in the triangle area just to make a starting groove to help situate myself and to not make too big of cuts for each layer. And then I carved the section closer to the wood itself, closer to the line I traced themselves. When I carved a section near the lines, I started by carving a groove near the junction between the stem and the cherry, because it felt like the harder section to carve and the more important one to carve for this portion of the cherry project, because it was I needed to preserve the curve of the cherry. I didn't have that much material to adjust with, and but for the stems, I was already planning on more or less freestyling them as I went later in the project, so it was not nearly as stressful. Though I say stressful, but it's a strong word for the situation. It was overall a very chill process, and it was, yeah, stressful is a strong word, but it's the closest one I can find right now. And as you may have noticed, I'm not one for second takes. If I stumble on my words, that's too bad, but that's what you're gonna get. I don't really do second takes because then I'd try to be perfect, and it would be just way too stressful, then it would really become a stressful process, and I would probably just stop doing videos altogether. But here, I'm just watching the video, making sure it's watchable, and commentating on what I'm seeing and reminiscing on the good things and the bad things, which is a fairly relaxing process that helps with processing and planning future projects. So it's constructive, but if I was trying to make it perfect, all of the retakes would just be a lot of wasted time. So I don't bother. Unless the recording software itself fails visibly, I do have places where I've noticed alerts at times. Then I just cut the current recording and then start recording from where it failed. There's no section of video that I've recorded twice. And now that the underside is done, I'm starting to work on the curve. I'm basically trying to continue the curve I'd started with the back to the front, which was pretty easy. There was just 2 corners to round off. And once that is done comes the more annoying part, I would say. That is splitting the cherries and making a hole around where the in between 2 stems. So to begin that, I just make a center line and trace out roughly where I want the cherries to be, and then I start carving from near the stems and just splitting the 2 sections of the block to make the spheres of the cherry. Now I'm going to be honest and say that this specific section of the project I do not like. It felt to me like it looked wrong. It looked like I was trying to carve something 18 plus, is how I'm going to be describing it. But so that's one of the reasons why I started carving the hole in between the stems as soon as I did. That was planned to be a final step of sorts, but it's at some point soon it's going to start looking kind of wrong. So I just jump straight into the hole between the stems to just get past that specific stage of the project as soon as possible. But that was a warning to myself to be careful about the steps I take when carving something to ensure that I don't accidentally go through a stage that looks problematic. Now it doesn't look that bad, it just enough to annoy me. This point here was where I started noticing that it was problematic, and I desperately tried to desperately is way too harsh a word, but I started trying to split the stem right now just so that I don't have to be distracted by the shape that was showing itself. But then before then I had to kind of find the center of the cherry, so I had to carve a bit of the sides. And here I'm using a chisel, a rounded chisel that I'm just twisting to pierce a hole through. And then once those holes are pierced, it's easy to go back in and remove small chips from there using the same chisel. And the knife, once it's the hole is a bit thicker and more wider, that way I was able to pretty easily separate the 2 stems, and I'm pretty happy with how that specific portion turned out. And once that hole was formed, I just tried to make the stem as thin as I could afford to without fear of breaking them. And then later, once the stems are figured out, I finish the shape of the cherries. The cherries didn't end up. No, they ended up fine. I'm not going to be too harsh on myself. There are slightly flatter sections. I could have gone further with the cherries, but I'm fairly happy with how I chose to end it. It's not a. It's very recognizable as cherries. It's not a. Not as round as I maybe could have made them, but I've never been particularly good with rounds and spheres when carving so far. So I'm not. It's better than my previous attempts at spheres or partial spheres. So I see the progression, so I'm not as annoyed with it as I have been in as I could have been in the past. And here we reach the painting portions. Once again, like most of the food items I've painted, with the exception of banana, I painted it all with just flat color straight out of the bottle, just because I didn't feel like for these food items, oftentimes it feels better to just have it very cartoony and not bother with any shading. I made an exception with the banana because I felt it was boring without any form of shading. And with that, Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to come by whenever you want. Bye.